And I want to be mates with Trump, who said that I should, that if I interfere with the 2024 election, he should spend the rest of his life in prison. So he did mention he might be a bit scared of that. He was involved in that, in Facebook suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, and I feel that he didn't like being a part of all that from watching interviews.
And also the suppression of arguments about gender. And sex, what is biological sex and whatnot. You get banned for saying there are two sexes.
They were on the wrong side of this, and now he's correcting. But the weird thing is, the people, of course, the people who don't like this, the lefties, this person, Ressa, is saying that this is a big problem. That it's an extremely dangerous time. I've seen all this from the lefties. They just call it disinformation. They're worried about this because to them it's disinformation. To other people it's information.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think we can all agree if people think they're getting their facts just directly from Facebook, then something's horribly wrong. But we know that. The community notes thing, I think, is quite good because that sort of first-hand experience people are putting down, aren't they?
Yeah. People have loads of different views come together, and it's an aggregate, so that's why it works.
GBNews, the People's Channel.
Morning, 9:30 on Thursday, the 23rd of January, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
The Southport killer Axel Ruda-Cabana will be sentenced this morning for the murder of 3 little girls, BB King, Elsie Dot Stancombe and Alice De Silva Aguirre. But how long will he spend behind bars?
Well, because Axel Ruda-Cabana was just 17 at the time of these horrific murders, he cannot receive a whole life tariff. In other words, at some point in the future, he may be released from prison, but that's likely to be after many decades.
The number of people crossing the channel now is shocking. It's record numbers, as you rightly say. And this was Rishi Sunak's pledge to the country 18 months ago that he'd stop the boats, and the numbers have gone up.
So that was Sir Keir Starmer back in July when he was leader of the opposition, slamming the then Conservative on migration numbers. But now a new record is set as under Labour, more than 1,000 illegal migrants have crossed the English Channel in small boats so far this year.
And this comes on the same day that it's revealed that 1 in 12 people in London is an illegal migrant, with estimates that 1 million illegal migrants live in the UK as a whole.
Asda, Morrisons, Tesco and Lidl have all joined forces calling for Labour to reverse those inheritance tax rules on farmers.
And a Russian spy ship has been warded off Britain's waters by Royal Navy submarine as Defence Secretary John Healey issues this warning to Vladimir Putin.
We see you, we know what you're doing, and we will not shy away from robust action to protect this country.
And parents are cheating the school system, as a new poll shows 1 in 4 admit to lying to get their children to their preferred school, and this has been exacerbated by the VAT hike on private schools.
And the Chancellor suggests net zero is less important than economic growth. So is it a boom for business? Is that more important than meeting our green goals? Well, we'll be debating that.
It's all me pals! Stepping time! Stepping time!
Do we need to save our chimney sweeps? That's my favourite chimney sweep, Dick Van Dyke from Mary Poppins. Find out why they're being asked to park away from their clients' homes in the city of Brighton.
I've got the song Chim Chimney, Chim Chimney in my head. Oh, what a wonderful film.
Oh, it's a fabulous film, one of my favourite films.
Isn't it ridiculous, the crackdown on wood burners?
I know. So people are now nervous about anyone spotting they're getting a chimney sweep in their home, so they're being asked to park around the corner in Brighton. Don't forget, Brighton was once run by the Green Party, and what a mess they made of that.
Well, I think this is a legacy from it, because there are all sorts of bans coming into place, aren't there? And so people are worried about it. But they smell so good, wood burners.
Of course they do. They do. And of course they've got a Green MP there too. Let us know what you think. Send your views, post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Andrew, thank you. The top stories. Child killer Axel Rudakabana will be sentenced later today after pleading guilty to 3 counts of murder. Alice Da Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stancombe were murdered in the vicious knife attack at a Taylor Swift dance-themed class last July. On Monday, the 18-year-old pleaded guilty to their murders, as well as to producing a biological toxin and being in possession of a PDF named the Al-Qaeda Training Manual. It's since emerged that Rudakabana was known to authorities, but they all failed to intervene. Downing Street indicated nothing is off the table to protect children when asked what actions would be taken to enforce the Prime Minister's promise of tougher rules on online knife sales. Now, some breaking news just in this morning that a manhunt is underway in Plymouth for a male murder suspect after a woman in her 40s died, having been found seriously injured yesterday evening. Devon and Cornwall police said officers were called to the West Hoe area of the city around 9 p.m. yesterday after the victim was found seriously injured in the street. The person was treated at the scene by paramedics and then taken to hospital. Detectives said the 2 people were believed to be known to one another. And Sir Keir Starmer's vowing to take on the NIMBYs by reducing legal challenges to infrastructure building with a new approach, stopping, quote, newts and bats from blocking construction. Attempts to complete projects such as to build roads and power plants have ended up in recent years being marred by legal challenges, which the Labour government is seeking to address. NIMBYs, which stands for Not in My Own Backyard, refers to people who oppose building in their area. The Prime Minister says for too long, blockers have had the upper hand in legal challenges using our court processes to frustrate growth. As part of the government's plans, so-called unarguable cases will only be able to be brought back to courts once, rather than the current 3 times. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More news in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and me, Miriam Cates, standing in for Bev Turner. Well, some of the stories about immigration that have still breaking the news are just so shocking. 1,000 people in one day. And then, of course, this estimation that there's, I think, 650,000 illegal immigrants in London itself.
Yeah, this has come out because Thames Water commissioned a study, and the Telegraph have got hold of the report. I think it's 585,000 they're identified in London alone.
Yeah.
And I heard some of the Conservatives say, oh, well, yeah, it's outrageous. We need to get them shipped back. Hang on, this happened on their watch.
That's right. It's been going on for
years.
And the problem seems to be that a lot of these people came over legally with a work visa or a study
visa.
But they've not left. And as that report that we were speaking about a couple of days ago showed, it's almost impossible now to deport people who overstay their visa or who come here illegally.
And it's why sometimes when you walk in certain parts of London, you feel it's a foreign city. And so 585,000, that's a Conservative estimate in my view.
Yes, absolutely.
It could easily be more. The overall figure we think is 1 million. And what do we do about it? Are they going to kick them out? Is the Labour government going to say, right, we're going to get to grips with it, kick them out? Because they shouldn't be here. They're doubtless using the NHS. Of course they are.
Well,
pressure on housing, pressure on schools.
Exactly. The problem seems to be, and that's what this Policy Exchange report was showing, was that unless we leave the ECHR, there will always be these human rights claims that means we can't deport people. But, it does beg the question, how do you identify people? Because we don't want a system where you have to have an ID card or something like that, or a policeman can demand to see your papers. But on the other hand, how do you identify? Is it through employers? I mean, they must be working.
Yeah, and
who's employing them?
And it means that figure of 585,000 means 1 in 12 people in London is here illegally.
Yeah.
And that is shocking and appalling. I don't know how to say it is shocking, actually, Miriam. I think I'm not surprised, actually.
But it just...
We know the government lost control of the borders years ago. I thought Brexit was going to mean we got control of our borders back. one thing the government did do, the last government, where they said about student visas, you can't bring your entire family in, which had been outrageous in the first place, because this has now led to a decline in the number of foreign students applying to go to our universities.
Yeah, there has been a decline in that and dependence this year, which is obviously good news, but it doesn't make any difference to the fact that we've already got potentially 1 million people in the country. And it's not just about pressure on services, it's also an enormous security risk, because if you're essentially here illegally with no papers, you know, no documentation, you can commit any crime at all.
And then disappear.
Exactly. It's frightening.
What do you think about that? Are you surprised by the figure? Say, it must be the first time, by the way, Thames Water have done anything useful or decent in a long time, because they're our biggest water company. They're about £14 billion in debt, and they are pretty damned incompetent and efficient. But that is a public service.
And it's why it's a useful report, because they didn't do the report to make a point about immigration.
No.
They wanted to know how many people are in London so that they can predict water supply. So it makes it quite a trustworthy report in many ways.
And of course, we have to add to that, that's the story that was in our headlines today. More than 1,000 illegal migrants have crossed the Channel this year alone. What are we? January the 23rd. And there we had Keir Starmer, Piers Starmer, bashing the Tories back in July because they hadn't got a grip of... There's going to be a record number this year. I thought they were going to smash the gangs.
Yeah. Well, we just need a deterrent, and OK, the Rwanda plan didn't work.
Well, they didn't try it.
They didn't try it, and the previous government wasn't willing to make it strong enough in order to resist the legal challenges. But at least it was some sort of deterrent, potential deterrent. Of course, that's completely gone now.
They should have said, when the European Court said the plane can't go to Rwanda, they should have said, get lost.
Yeah.
We're sending it. What would have happened? Oh, we could have been fined.
Yeah.
Good.
I know.
They should have been plane after plane after plane, and that, I think, would have stopped this endless cycle of migrants crossing here. Because we know that some of the migrants in Northern Ireland, Miriam, crossed the border into Southern Ireland because they feared they were going to be shipped to Rwanda.
That's right. And we know that there were some people waiting in Calais for the general election because they thought they'd be safer to come across if Labour won.
Well.
But it's not going to be sorted out quickly. But a government at some point is going to have to be extremely bold.
They certainly are. No.
Also, we've got, coming up on the programme, a child killer, Axel Rudikabana, who is going to be sentenced later today.
Alice De Silva, Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stankham, there's the pictures of them, gorgeous little girls. They were all murdered in that vicious knife attack at the Taylor Swift-themed class last July in Southport.
Well, on Monday, 18-year-old Rudikabana pleaded guilty to their murders, as well as to producing a biological toxin and being in possession of a PDF named the Al-Qaeda Training Manual.
GBNews Home and Security Editor Mark White has this report.
In the aftermath of the horrific events in Southport, anger and disorder struck many communities. Amid a perception authorities were not disclosing key facts about teenage killer Axel Rudikabana, a young man with a violent and deeply disturbing mindset that saw him refer to the Prevent Counter-Extremism programme 3 times, as well as multiple other agencies. We now know, as confirmed by the Prime Minister this week, that information was withheld. Sir Keir Starmer said it was done to ensure any forthcoming trial would not be prejudiced.
The importance of the rule about not disclosing this information is to ensure that the trial can take place and that where an individual is guilty, they're held to account.
But with little official information in the aftermath of the stabbings, the void was filled with online speculation and rumour, which only compounded the sense of outrage and anger. Axel Rudikabana was first referred to the Prevent programme back in 2019, when he was just 13 years of age, after he took a knife to his former school in Formby. It was one of 10 occasions he admitted carrying a knife at school. After being excluded, he returned and assaulted pupils with a hockey stick. He was open in discussing his desire to carry out a school massacre. Yet it seems, because there was no apparent evidence that his views were aligned to any particular terrorist group or ideology, counter-extremism practitioners decided not to intervene. Police, the courts, youth justice, social services and other safeguarding agencies also failed to respond in any meaningful way as Rudakabana's downward spiral towards serious violence intensified. And other questions still remain unanswered. A week before the Southport attacks, the teenager's father pleaded with a local taxi driver not to drive him to his former high school, where it's thought he was planning to carry out an attack there. Despite the deadly toxin ricin and Al-Qaeda jihadist documents being discovered at his home just days after the attack, it took a further 3 months before a terror charge and a biological weapons charge were added to the indictment and the public informed. In the months ahead, a public inquiry may provide some answers. Today, the focus is on the length of time in prison the trial judge will decide is the most appropriate response to the most evil and horrific of crimes. Mark White, GB News, Merseyside.
And the fact that that information was withheld for 3 months about his there was lots of terrorist activity on his internet. All the stuff about jihadis and was withheld, and the ricin for 3 months. It will feed the idea that the government and the authorities presided over a cover-up.
Absolutely. And we're going to be speaking to a lawyer later and delving into this idea that Starmer says that they couldn't release that information because it would have prejudiced the trial. And lots of senior lawyers have come out and said that's rubbish.
Flatly contradicted it, including the government's own independent advisor on terrorism, Jonathan Hall, KC. Now, up next, major supermarkets are stepping up their support for the farmers. Good. But first, if you're in search of that elusive winter sun, here's the forecast of some of our top European holiday destinations.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're tempted to leave the stormy weather in the UK behind and search for some winter sun, actually, there will be some across the Mediterranean, certainly some sunny spells for the Canaries, just 1 or 2 showers around. Windier for Portugal, that's all connected to Friday's storm in the UK, a few showers for Spain, but a lot of fine weather across Italy and Greece aside from the odd shower. Then it does turn much more unsettled across Spain, Portugal and into parts of France during the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Lisa, you got in touch with me and you flagged this survey because you were concerned as a parent that your child had been given this to fill out.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter came home from school, she was very confused. She was asking why somebody would want to hurt themselves if they were feeling sad or worried about something. So that led to a conversation that we had, and I actually phoned the school and asked them to send me the survey, which with a lot of pushing, they eventually did send me the survey. And when I read through it, I was just completely shocked at the content. The survey says when I'm feeling worried that maybe I should try cutting or harming myself, because it's in the survey, so that must be an option. I've tried everything else, so why not try this?
It is astonishing that some of these are young children who are perhaps being introduced to these, these abuses for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a list of 17 different types of drugs, some of which I've actually never heard of myself. I mean, the wording on here is, have you ever got high from taking drugs? I mean...
And we know that some of these behaviours, self-harm, gender dysphoria, taking drugs, are psychologically contagious. Children do them because they see other children do them, or they find out about them from the internet or from surveys like this. So the idea that this is just information gathering and won't go any further than that is ridiculous. There was a similar survey in Scotland, I think, about 3 years ago, where children the same age, 11, 12, 13, were asked about their sex lives. How many times have you had sex in the last year? How did you have sex? Did you use contraception? Totally normalising underage sex. So the idea that children are just mini adults and we can confront them with all the same kind of ideas and dilemmas that adults have to face is just ridiculous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 11 minutes to 10 and you're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Now, Tesco have warned that Rachel Reeves' tax raid on farmers is putting Britain's food security at risk and it must be stopped.
So they've joined with Morrison's, Aldi and Lidl have all issued similar warnings in a rare show of unity between the supermarket chains.
Well, we're now joined by former Labour Special Advisor and columnist Paul Richards. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. It's quite extraordinary to see the supermarkets not only cooperating, but also getting involved in politics, which is not something that they normally do. They must be very seriously concerned about what Labour's tax raid means for the future of British food security.
Good morning, Miriam, and good morning, Andrew. I mean, I would say that if food security is being threatened, it's not being threatened by the government, who obviously want us to have the food on the shelves, and nor is it being threatened by the supermarkets who want to sell us the food. It's being threatened by militant farmers, most of whom, by the way, not affected by the changes in tax at all, who are threatening to disrupt our food supplies. And I think the public will look at that and think, well, these are people who are being asked to pay a fair whack of tax, same as everyone else. Not the same rate, by the way, as you and me for inheritance tax, lesser rate, but most of them unaffected, who are now threatening to blockade and to barrack and to come down to the city and block everything up. And I just think people will think that's not really on.
But it's not quite the same as everybody else, is it? Because other businesses, and of course farms are businesses, can be passed down without inheritance tax. So actually it has been singling out farmers for special treatment in a very negative way.
I think the issue is that many of the very top landowners sort of pretend to be farmers in order to avoid inheritance tax. And I mean, the cause is not helped when people are revealed to have been, chairman of the stock exchange or Jeremy Clarkson, people like that who've said quite clearly they're doing it to avoid paying tax. And so, it has been conflated. But, you talked in your intro about the farmers. I would just restate, it's not. The vast majority of our hard-working farmers who are affected by this and the people we do rely on to put the food on our plates and who we support. This is a minority who have been getting away with basically a tax dodge. And all we're saying is that the Labour government is saying is that people have to pay their fair whack. So I think that's the situation. And the supermarket's absolutely right to warn, because it doesn't take much, as we know from COVID and other things, for shocks in the system to mean that the shelves empty pretty quick, and then you get the panic buying and hoarding and all the rest of it. So I can see why Tesco, Co-op, Morrison's, etc. are saying this, because it won't take too many of the militant farmers, not the mainstream, to come and disrupt our food supply.
Paul, aren't you just parroting the Treasury line that it will only affect 500 farms? Because if you talk to the National Farmers Union, the Labour Party tends to listen to trade unions, but clearly not the Farmers Union in this case. They say it's going to affect thousands of small family-run farms because many family-run farms, the land alone is worth £2, maybe £3 million. And if farmer dies, they're going to have to sell part of the farm to pay the inheritance tax because the threshold kicks in at £1.5 million.
I mean, the National Farmers Union is a large and effective trade union, as you say, and it is representing its members. Nothing wrong with that, but I think they're over-egging the pudding. And I think.
But why do you disbelieve that union, Paul? But you may agree with the train drivers' union or other trade unions. Why are Labour not listening to this union?
Because I think you have to look at the evidence as presented, and the numbers that were put to the Treasury when they were formulating the budget were that it would be a small number, including those that are not really farmers at all, but sort of set up a kind of a small holding in order to avoid the tax. And then people like Jeremy Clarkson have talked openly about such dodges. So I think it's something just bringing the law up to scratch with everybody else, making sure that everyone pays their fair share. The economy, as we know, is in the doldrums, and everyone has to weather some of that storm collectively.
But the trouble is, Paul, that it isn't fair. And if you're talking about inheritance tax on a house, let's say, when somebody dies, very obviously you can sell the house. The problem with a farm, it might be worth a lot of money on paper because land prices are high, but if you sell it, it ceases to be a farm. If you sell it for development, it ceases to be a farm, and then we've lost our food security. How is this fair when it's being treated so differently to other assets?
Well, I think all of these businesses do have to plan ahead, and they've been given plenty of notice. There'll be plenty of years to plan. There's also insurance products that you can take out unadvised. I don't know for sure, but I've been told that. But also, I think, if you do, a business may well have to sell part of its empire to cover tax bills. We all have to think about how we're going to have to cover our tax when we die, and these businesses,
Paul, I'm really sorry, we're going to have to go there.
Multi-millionaires. I
do apologise for cutting you off, but we're going to have to go now, I'm afraid.
Nice to see you. No problem.
Sorry, lovely to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Plenty more to come. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Here's your weather.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A big change in the weather on the way. A spell of wind and rain today. That clears later. Then some even wetter and windier weather expected throughout Friday and Saturday with Storm Eowyn moving in. Now, this system at the start of today isn't Storm Eowyn, but it is good to bring a spell of heavy rain across the country for a few hours, along with some very gusty winds, 50, 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts for southern and western England, as well as Wales. But it does move through. Brighter skies follow for Northern Ireland, Wales and the south by the end of the day, whilst the wet weather remains across Scotland and eastern England. Eventually, though, that tends to push northeastwards with clearing skies across the southern half of the UK. We're going to see temperatures fall away, lighter winds as well. So a fine end to Thursday, but quite a number of showers into North Wales, Northern England and Northern Ireland. And the most unsettled weather is expected at 6 p.m. across Scotland, with showers falling as sleet and snow over the hills. It's going to be blustery as well as the day comes to a close across Scotland. But overnight, those winds tend to ease, and with clear spells, temperatures fall away. A touch of frost likely for eastern and northeastern parts of the country, but that's only ahead of a very fierce low that's moving in overnight. This is Storm Eowyn, likely to bring widespread disruption by the start of Friday. Heavy rain, especially in the southwest, a spell of hill snow for northern England and Scotland. But the biggest cause for concern are the winds widely across the UK, away from the southeast, 60 or even 70 mile-per-hour wind gusts. But for Irish Sea coast, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, through northern England and North Wales, the risk during the first half of Friday of 80 or 90 mile-per-hour wind gusts. That could cause serious disruption and damage in places.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the A720 Edinburgh bypass, there are long delays after an accident earlier westbound between the Bamerton Junction and the Calder Junction. It's been taking over an hour in queues from the Gilmerton Junction. Eastbound delays too past the scene back to Hermiston Gate. Now in West Yorkshire, the A63 remains closed each way along Selby Road in Micklefield after an accident yesterday afternoon. In Northamptonshire on the A14, there's a lane closed westbound just after Junction 2 at Kelmarsh after an accident. Queues towards the M1 and M6 back to Junction 4 at Rothwell. On the M4 in Berkshire, 2 out of 5 lanes are closed eastbound after an accident between junctions 5 and 4B towards the M25. Queues from junction 6 at Slough. Train services are suspended between Purley and both Caterham and Tattenham Corner because of an incident. In West Sussex, the A272 is closed at Billingshurst.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt a lot lighter. I would say if you're thinking about entering, just enter.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Thursday the 23rd of January. We are live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
The Southport killer Axel Rutagbarnu will be sentenced this morning for the murder of those 3 little girls, BB King, Elsie Stankham and Alice De Silva Aguirre. But how long will he spend behind bars?
The number of people crossing the channel now is shocking. It's record numbers, as you rightly say. And this was Rishi Sunak's pledge to the country 18 months ago that he'd stop the boats, and the number's gone up.
Well, that was Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer back in July, slamming the then Conservative government on the migration numbers. But now a new record has been set under Labour, as more than 1,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel in small boats so far this year.
And this comes as it's revealed 1 in 12 people in London is also an illegal migrant, with estimates 1 million of them live in the UK.
And Asda, Morrison's, Tesco's and Lidl have all joined forces to call for Labour to reverse the inheritance tax rules for farmers.
And a Russian spy ship has been warded off British waters by a Royal Navy submarine. The Defence Secretary, John Healey, issued this warning to Putin.
We see you, we know what you're doing, and we will not shy away from robust action to protect this country.
And the Chancellor suggests net zero is less important than economic growth. So is a boom for business more important than meeting our green goals? Well, we'll be debating that.
And some parents are cheating the school system, as a poll shows 1 in 4 admit to lying to get their children into their preferred school, and this has been exacerbated by the VAT raid on private schools.
It's all me pals! Stepping time! Stepping time!
Well, do we need to save our chimney sweeps? Find out why they're being asked to park away from their clients' homes in Brighton. Well, it's quite a big number. 1 in 4 parents supposedly lying to get their children into a school. I assume lying about where they live.
Or their faith.
Or their faith, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's definitely been, the number is increased because of Labour's tax rate on private schools, 20% on VAT, which I think shamefully has kicked in this month, which halfway through the school year. So parents are having to take children out of school halfway through the year. I think that was really vindictive of the government, actually.
Absolutely.
Even if you agree with the policy, why didn't they wait till the new school year started in September?
Absolutely.
Are
And
they
there's
that desperate?
Horrible stories of children, mid-GCSEs and things like that being pulled out. But in terms of, getting your child into the catchment school or the faith school, of course it's wrong to lie. But on the other hand, parents do whatever they can for their children. And the problem is so many schools are not doing the job that parents want them to do. And that's why they're going to these lengths to get them into better schools. Yeah, maybe you're one of those parents. Let us know. Would you tell a fib to get your child into a better school? We'd love to hear what you think. Send your views and post your comments too. gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Miriam, thank you very much and good morning. The top stories this hour. Child killer Axel Rudakabana will be sentenced later today after pleading guilty to 3 counts of murder. Alice De Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stankham were all murdered in the vicious knife attack at a Taylor Swift dance-themed class last July. On Monday, the 18-year-old pleaded guilty to their murders, as well as to producing a biological toxin and being in possession of a PDF named the Al-Qaeda Training Manual. It's since emerged that Rudakabana was known to authorities, but they all failed to intervene. Downing Street indicated nothing is off the table to protect children when asked what actions would be taken to enforce Sir Keir Starmer's promise of tougher rules on online knife sales. Well, Sir Keir Starmer is vowing to take on the NIMBYs by reducing legal challenges to infrastructure building with a new approach stopping, quote, newts and bats from blocking construction. Attempts to complete projects such as to build roads and power plants have ended up in recent years being marred by legal challenges, which the Labour government is seeking to address. NIMBYs, which stands for Not in My Backyard, refers to people who oppose building in their area. The Prime Minister says for too long, blockers have had the upper hand in legal challenges, using our court processes to frustrate growth. As part of the government's plan, so-called unarguable cases will only be able to be brought back to courts once rather than the current 3. Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook told GB News this morning today's action will help to bring down energy bills.
Will still have a right to object to planning applications. They'll right to have a say to challenge the lawfulness of government decisions. What we're saying today is that as part of our plan for change, we've got to kickstart economic growth. We've got to streamline the delivery of critical national infrastructure that our country needs, whether that's energy, transport or aviation projects, and particularly in terms of the energy infrastructure that needs to come forward under our plan for change to get to clean power by 2030, that we get more timely decisions on these projects. That is the only way we're going to wean ourselves off a dependence on foreign energy sources and our exposure to volatile energy price spikes.
In other news, The Telegraph has revealed London is home to an estimated 585,000 illegal migrants, making up 1 in 12 of the city's population. Concerns over border control failures and pressure on public services are growing, but official figures from the Home Office are not available. The study, commissioned by Thames Water, suggests there are over 1 million illegal migrants in the UK, with 60% of those in the capital. The report suggests most illegal migrants arrived in the UK on work, study or visitor visas and then overstayed. The Metropolitan Police has been removed from special measures after more than 2 years, as good progress has been made, according to the watchdog. The force had been put into special measures following extensive criticism it faced after the death of Sarah Everard, who was abducted and murdered by serving Met officer Wayne Couzens. Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley said the whole force has worked to fix its broken foundations and to make sure officers are set up to deliver for London. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services said the Met has made a number of improvements, including in how quickly calls are answered, in professional standards and in investigating missing children. Elsewhere, the fires in California have flared up again, with more than 30,000 people told to evacuate north of LA. The latest blaze, dubbed the Hughes Fire, started late yesterday morning, around 40 miles from Eaton and Palisades wildfires that devastated parts of LA earlier this month. Within hours, the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection said the blaze had burned across more than 9,000 acres. They added the fire was at 0% containment. Since the first outbreak at the beginning of January, 27 people have died and dozens are still missing. A manhunt is underway in Plymouth for a male murder suspect after a woman in her 40s died, having been found seriously injured yesterday evening. Devon and Cornwall police said officers were called to the West Hoe area of the city at around 9 p.m. yesterday after that victim was found seriously injured in the street. The person was treated at the scene, then taken to hospital. Detectives said the two people were believed to be known to one another. The Met Office has issued a rare red weather warning for Northern Ireland as Britain braces for strong winds, rain and snow from Storm Eowyn. It's set to hit the country with gusts of up to 90 miles per hour. There are even warnings of possible tornadoes in the south of England today. Forecasters predict the worst of the wind will happen tomorrow when that storm does arrive. The Met Office has advised people to secure loose items outside their homes as there could be a danger to life caused by flying debris. And finally, in sport, Real Madrid have become the first football club to generate more than €1 billion. That's £840 million in revenue in a single year, winning both La Liga and the Champions League last season. Deloitte said the Spanish club had overtaken Man City to reclaim top spot in its Football Money League. Real Madrid also saw matchday revenues increase in 2023 and last year after renovations to the Bernabeu Stadium, doubling to £209 million. And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more from me in half an hour.
Hello, welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, let's see what you've been saying on gbnews.com/your say. Lots of you getting in touch.
Yes, and lots of comments on this revelation from the Telegraph that 1 in 12 people in London is an illegal immigrant. Kathleen says, Andrew, you're quite right. My parents, if they woke up in London now, they would wonder where they were. They were very familiar with London during the 30s and 40s. It's completely different now.
You go to Tower Hamlets, for instance, that's the old East London borough, Stepney, Whitechapel, Mile End. That was what my parents would have called their manor when they were growing up. It's like you're in... You could be in Bengal or Pakistan. It's incredible. And large swathes of the capital, I think of a lot of our cities now, feel completely different.
Well, that's it. And it's like we're two nations because this has happened to a lot of our cities.
Yeah.
The vast majority of immigration has come to cities. Yeah. But, of course, our towns and villages still look quite similar to what they did.
It's the failure of multiculturalism. So the migrants will all live in that part of Leicester or that part of Bradford, and some people regard it now as no-go areas, which you get into terrible trouble if you use that expression. I'm not saying they're no-go areas, but that's how some people feel it is.
Well, and increasingly now people are actually feeling free to say multiculturalism has failed. What you do about it is a different matter.
Well, I think it has failed.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't think multiculturalism is possible. Surely, if you are a nation, you need some sort of common culture. That doesn't mean there can't be variation and things like that. But anyway, moving on, Rob says we don't need more housing, we need less people. And Jim's got an idea. Why don't we use national insurance numbers as ID? I'm quite sure that these people won't have one. Then you can take action against any employer who has workers without an NI number, give them a heavy fine.
And when you see these figures, at least 1 million illegal migrants in the country, 1 in 8, 1 in 12 in London, 600,000 give or take, it's going to speed up the course for an ID card.
It is, absolutely. And then you've got, very difficult questions to answer about everybody else's freedom. Yes, one of the many, many problems need to be solved about immigration. Well, moving on, the child killer, Axel Rudikabana, will be sentenced later today.
Just to remind you, of course, you don't need reminding really, Alice da Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stancombe were murdered in that appalling knife attack at the Taylor Swift theme class last July in Southport.
Well, we're joined by GB News Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, thank you for joining us. What can we expect throughout the course of today?
Well, the first thing, of course, we can expect is the arrival here at Liverpool Crown Court of Axel Rudikabana. We're told that is imminent, that the police are standing by for what will, as we've seen in the past, be an escort of vans arriving here at Crown Court for that sentencing, which is due to get underway about 11 this morning. There will be a summary of the case that the prosecution would have put before the court had this gone to a full trial. Of course, there was a surprise decision by Axel Rudakabana to plead guilty to the 16 counts against him on Monday, meaning that the families at least have been spared the ordeal of having to sit through potentially up to 8 weeks or more of sometimes very harrowing evidence in the court behind me. So we'll get that summary of the case. We're also going to get victim impact statements from a significant number of the bereaved families, other family members whose loved ones were caught up in this attack. Remember that 8 children were also injured along with 2 adults. So that will be very difficult, of course, to impart, but important to impart to our audience just the impact that that has had on the families of the 3 young girls who were murdered by Axel Rudakabana, but also those who were injured, lives potentially forever altered. And then, of course, the judge will begin his sentencing remarks in the early afternoon. Because he was 17 at the time of the Southport attacks, Axel Rudakabana cannot be given a whole life tariff. In other words, spending the rest of his life behind bars. It will, having said that though, be a very significant sentence that the judge hands down here.
All right, that's Mark White at the Liverpool Crown Court. Let's talk to the barrister and writer Stephen Barrett. Stephen, Mark White has framed the first question to you. Of course, people watching and listening will be outraged that this monster can't be given a whole life sentence. They're rare, but there are examples of it because he was deemed not old enough. Should the law change?
Well, we can change the law. I think we should change it. The Prime Minister could have used his majority in Parliament to change it so that it changed for Axel. I mean, it would have been rare, and I'm sure, you know, people would have bleated about it, but in the grand scheme of things, he's avoiding a whole life tariff because of 10 days. That's it. So really, you know, that seems to me a technicality. And I would have liked my country and my Prime Minister to have taken action to avoid that. But that's where we are. We are where we are. What we mustn't do, and I get increasingly frustrated at what I call the responsibility gap. You know, the Prime Minister will talk about votes for 16-year-olds, but the idea that they might be liable for their criminal actions, apparently there has to be a gap between that. And I think we as a country need to look at this. Unfortunately, I mean, this is, I just want to be absolutely unequivocal, this is evil. What we're going to discover and the details that are going to come out are horrific. He didn't just murder 3 beautiful, innocent children. He stabbed 10 other people, grotesquely, and he traumatized everybody who wasn't stabbed. So some of the children weren't stabbed, thank goodness. But they will also be absolutely traumatized by this. It's the most horrific thing that could happen in their lives. They went just to have a dance to Taylor Swift. That's what they were doing. And he decided to bring evil into their lives. And I think that is something that we as a nation, we need to accept. It does live among us. I think we should praise, I hope the two of you don't mind me doing this, but Leanne Lucas and John Hayes were stabbed in defence of children. Now, I hope that if I were in a similar situation, that's what I would have done. And I think the two of them are absolute heroes. And we as a country should do something for Leanne and John. We should honour them. We should make them knights and dames. I mean, he represents absolute evil, and they represent good. They are heroes in our society, and we are lucky to have them.
Absolutely, they are absolute heroes. They could easily have run away. Stephen, can we just talk about the Prime Minister's claim that the reason the public were not made aware of some of the details of this case was in order to prevent the trial from being prejudiced? That claim's been challenged by a number of lawyers now. Where do you stand on that?
I don't believe the Prime Minister to be honest. So that claim doesn't stack up on any level. So he says he couldn't have told us in August that it was terrorism, and then he tells us in October that it's terrorism. He knew back then, and I'm afraid the only conclusion that a rational person can draw is that we don't have an honest Prime Minister. Well, we are where we are as a nation. Today, I think we should focus on the little girls and their families. We should show them that we care about them, because there was a very disturbing report yesterday from one of the grandfathers, I think, of a survivor, who said that the government have abandoned them. Well, we must not abandon them. They must know that our hearts are with them. Our hearts are with Southport today. We care about those little girls. And that whatever our Prime Minister is a matter for him. We'll deal with him tomorrow.
Stephen, well said. That's Stephen Barrett, the barrister and writer. I'm afraid I agree with him. I don't think the Prime Minister is being honest. I think it was willfully and deliberately withheld, and I just suspect that somehow our Prime Minister was involved in that decision. He's a lawyer, not a leader, and he was a former director of the Crown Prosecution Service, and it was the Crown Prosecution Service that insisted that information was withheld. And even the Chief Constable, she said, of Merseyside, has said, they wanted to put more information out and they were told they couldn't.
Yeah. And it goes against precedent. Unfortunately, we have had incidents like this in the past, and information was
Well, we saw with the murder of David Amos. We talked to his daughter yesterday, the Tory MP. We knew straight away that the murder of David Amos had been referred to...
Prevent, and that he'd had Islamist content on his computer and everything, Well, hopefully, all this information will come out in the inquiry.
Yeah, right.
Well, we'll see. Well, up next, find out what new record has been set by this Labour government. Probably not one they'll be pleased with. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Well, you know I like an auction.
Yes.
And I've bought some strange things at auction before you have as well, haven't you, Eamon?
Yeah, well, Ellie would throw this in the bin that you're coming up with now.
How about this? Admiral Lord Nelson's hair.
Nice.
Cut. I mean, is this a bit spooky? Cut as he lay dying during the Battle of Trafalgar, so someone's gone, oh, we'll just have a little bit of that there. In 1805, is on sale in Jersey, and it's a little cup. How much would you pay for the hair?
No, nothing. It would go in the bin, straight in the bin.
What, even? What? Nelson? That's very disrespectful to the British culture and heritage.
I think it's disrespectful that he lay there dying and someone thought, we'll take a quick strip
maybe they just had, maybe they thought, you know, because there's obviously the famous painting, isn't there, of the Battle of Trafalgar. Maybe they thought, we'll give him a quick haircut, and then they kept their £15,000. 15 grand.
Where's the hair come from? What part of the body?
His head, Eamon.
Well, it could be his underarm. I don't know. You know, it depends.
Hold on, let me have a little look.
You would bid
it's very curly. I think it's his. I think it's his head. It's his head. What?
You would bid more for his head than say his underarm.
Well, I think so. Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah.
Or anywhere else.
I would hope so. A little less whiffy there, the head hair. And there it is. And it's in a little pot.
No.
And the only way you can probably find out is if you DNA test it, I guess. It's definitely his.
Whoever pays for that is bonkers.
Well,
that's creepy.
I was seriously tempted to make a bid for a toupee, not for me, but as worn by John Wayne.
John Wayne's wig?
Yeah.
Why?
Wow.
Why?
Well, why I didn't get it was my wife said to me, that is not coming into the house.
Well, she's right. She's right.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 22 minutes past 10 and this is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates. Well, joining us in the studio now to go through today's papers, we've got broadcaster and journalist Carol Malone and former Labour MP Bill Rammell.
I don't think you've done this panel with this before, Bill.
I have not when you've been here, Andrew.
Oh, right.
Bill and I had a big Barney's the other night on Patrick's show.
Oh, no, right.
This is like round two.
Right, let's have a Barney now. Do you want to talk about Prince Harry?
I want to talk about Prince Harry. This was the warrior for truth and accountability and justice, the man who said he was going to take on the media because they needed to be accountable. And so when the money got up to the amount he was interested in hearing, he's taken it. So what price his principles, I wonder? Now, I know there'll be people all over the country saying he won. What's he won? He didn't win anything. A news group of newspapers have not admitted any responsibility. They have not admitted liability. They have not admitted phone hacking. They've said if any of that happened, or gathering information illegally, if any of that happened, they said it happened on the News of the World. Well, it's easy to say that because, of course, that's been closed for 10 years. But he has not battered down news group newspapers like he said he was going to do.
He said he wanted his day in court.
And I would love him to have had his day in court because I would love to have seen him prove what he claimed had happened. But, you know, what they've done is news group newspapers is they've basically bought him off and shut him up. And that's what he said was never going to happen a few years ago when, if you remember, lots of celebs, Hugh Grant in particular, said they couldn't take the money because if they'd been awarded 1 penny less than what they'd been offered out of court, they would have had to pay all of the costs, which could have been 10 million quid. So when celebrities said they couldn't afford that, Harry said, don't worry, money's no object to me. Yeah. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take you on. And look what he's done. It got up to between 10 and 20 million. Oh, I think I'll have that.
Well, I think it's 10 million, isn't it? The total
well,
package.
I don't know. There's
8 figures, so it could be anything over 10.
I think we're hearing it's 10 million, but a lot of that is his costs.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that probably Meghan's had a hard word, because if you might remember, there was an article in a magazine a year ago where she said she wished he would stop the obsession with all the lawsuits because it was hurting him and it was hurting their family. And she said, you know, she wanted him to have peace from all that. So I suspect that now, because their income stream is drying up. They're not America's darlings anymore. Vanity Fair turned on them last week. You know, Spotify dumped them. Netflix, Meghan's new show's not going out because of the California wildfires. So I suspect they couldn't afford to lose 10 million costs.
Look, the reality of why he's pulled out and reached a settlement is our privacy laws. And frankly, I think that needs looking at. That, you know, you go into a court case and if you don't accept the deal and you end up with a penny less than that, all the costs are awarded against you. And, you know, when someone as wealthy as Hugh Grant reaches that conclusion that he has to settle, there's something wrong with the privacy laws. However,
that's an excuse. We are where we are. These are the laws.
I'm not always a Harry fan, but I salute him. He stood up to news group newspapers. He's got a 10 million plus settlement, and he's received the biggest admission of guilt that newsgroup newspapers.
Admission of guilt. I'm sorry, Bill.
Hold on.
Legally, you've just. That's wrong. There has been an apology. It is not an admission of guilt.
And an acceptance that private investigators, on behalf of The Sun, were hacking
News of the World.
On the behalf of the News of the World.
Criminal activities.
What's News of the World?
Not criminal activities. On behalf of the News of the World. You've got to get this right. It's really important, because newsgroup newspapers got it right when they settled, because they were very particular about the wording of this settlement.
And tell me why the lawyer for Prince Harry yesterday, without challenge by The Sun or newsgroup newspapers, was able to compare what Rebecca Brooks said in her 2014 trial, where she said we ran a clean ship, with an admission yesterday that there'd been a criminal enterprise under The Sun and under newsgroup newspapers.
No heads have rolled at newsgroup newspapers, so there is no victory for Harry there.
That's a scandal. And frankly, as the lawyer for Prince Harry and Tom Watson said yesterday, this needs to be referred to the Metropolitan Police.
How do you find Tom Watson? This is a man who besmirched the reputation of some of our finest figures. Lord Bramall, who was a chief of defence staff, who was a war hero. He repeated untrue allegations by a man who's now in prison for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice and paedophilia. for 18 and a half years. Tom Watson abused parliamentary privilege to name and make all these wicked allegations against Leon Britton, who was dying at the time. None of it was true. And then he stands there all piously going on about how appalling the newspaper. He has behaved abominably well.
I worked with Tom Watson in government.
Answer what I've just said.
And I'm going to answer what you said. I think he got it fundamentally wrong once he left government, and when he was on the Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee, and he was taking on people like Bramall, Leon Britton, and actually the most appalling case that I can't quite recall, where there was the fantasist who was alleging paedophilia.
Carl Beach.
Yeah, Carl Beach.
They were all the allegations from Carl Beach.
He got it fundamentally wrong. However, on this, he's fundamentally right, and I think there's been an abuse of power, an abuse of the press by newsgroup newspapers.
Of destroying the lives of innocent people, and you're saying it's a good thing.
Harry would argue that his life has been destroyed, starting as a child when his mother and his own private lives were intruded on. So I do think
I'm sorry, they have said there was intrusion. However, when you're a member of the royal family, it is I'm not saying to the extent to which Diana was followed, but and Harry has no right to complain about intrusion, because by the time he was growing up and in school, he was not disturbed by the press. They had a very nice childhood until they got to 18 and then came out into the world.
Parents' divorce and his mother's death. But I mean,
I'm sorry. No, I'm talking about at the hands of the press.
Yeah, there was a deal. There was a deal with the media. The kids were left alone completely when they were at school.
Come on, his mother was killed.
By a drunk driver?
Yeah, when there was a press pack chase going against her.
French paparazzi.
French paparazzi. And it was a drunk driver that killed her. A guy who'd been drinking all night. So let's not say the press murdered her, because that is simply not, although Harry says that.
And Harry, look, Harry it was a terrible blow for him to lose his mother so young, in such terrible circumstances, and to have grieve in the eyes of the world on him. But he died, she died, because Omri Paul was drunk and on drugs, and she did not have her seatbelt on.
I accept that, and I also accept that Harry has got some judgments wrong during his recent life. I mean, you know, to end up estranged from his father and his brother at this time, I think is, apart from an excuse, it's very, very sad. However, on what we're talking about, he was fundamentally right. There was an abuse of power, an abuse of the law by newsgroup newspapers, and it needs to be sorted out.
But what a pity he didn't fight it then. What a pity he didn't go to court and actually take newsgroup newspapers on and actually put his case in front of the country, in front of the world.
But Carol, that's an indictment of the legal system.
No, it isn't. He knew what the legal system was. Bill, he understood the legal system.
As wealthy as Harry ultimately has to pull out.
He understood. He didn't have to pull out.
Carol,
he chose to pull out.
Are you defending that legal system, that if you're taking a privacy case, you are effectively bullied out from taking your case to court?
What I'm saying to you is,
because you can't
it was
risk
fully
the financial
explained
ruin.
to him how the legal system worked. He knew that, if not the least because of Hugh Grant, because of what they said. But what he said at the time was, we are going to... He said, forget all of that. I'm going to take it on, despite the system and despite how much it cost.
He's gone further than anyone, and he's brought it...
Well, he's done nothing.
He's brought about the biggest admission of guilt by
we wanted his grievances aired. We've not heard them because he's taken the money.
We have to go to the headlines. You two can carry on after a little later, because we want to get to the headlines now with Tatiana Sanchez. Thank you very much.
Good morning. The top stories. Child killer Axel Rudakabana will be sentenced later today after pleading guilty to 3 counts of murder. Alice De Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stankham were all murdered in the vicious knife attack at a Taylor Swift dance-themed class last July. On Monday, the 18-year-old pleaded guilty to their murders, as well as to producing a biological toxin and also being in possession of a PDF named the Al-Qaeda Training Manual. It's since emerged that Rudakabana was known to authorities, but they all failed to intervene. Downing Street indicated nothing is off the table to protect children when asked what actions would be taken. And these are some live pictures of Axel Rudakabana arriving to Liverpool Crown Court, where, as I say, he will be sentenced later today after pleading guilty to 3 counts of murder. That's Axel Rudakabana, the 18-year-old there, arriving to Liverpool Crown Court. We will, of course, keep you across all of the latest as soon as we get it. In other news, Sir Keir Starmer is vowing to take on the NIMBYs by reducing legal challenges to infrastructure building with a new approach stopping, quote, newts and bads from blocking construction. Attempts to complete projects such as to build roads and power plants have ended up in recent years being marred by legal challenges, which the Labour government is seeking to address. NIMBYs, which stands for Not in My Backyard, refers to people who oppose building in their area. The Prime Minister says for too long, blockers have had the upper hand in legal challenges, using our court process to frustrate growth. As part of the government's plans, so-called unarguable cases will only be able to be brought back to courts once, rather than the current 3 times. And dangerous conditions are expected with the top-level red warning for wind issued for Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland across Friday morning. It's set to hit the country with gusts of up to 90 miles per hour. There are even warnings of possible tornadoes in the south of England today. Forecasters predict the worst of the wind will happen tomorrow when that storm does arrive. The Met Office has advised people to secure loose items outside their homes, as there could be a danger to life caused by some flying debris. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, up next, Chancellor Rachel Reeves suggests economic growth is more important than reaching net zero targets. Common sense, do we think?
Well, she better have a word with her mate Ed Miliband,
Yes,
the climate change sector, because he doesn't agree with a word of it. That's all coming up. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A big change in the weather on the way. A spell of wind and rain today. That clears later. Then some even wetter and windier weather expected throughout Friday and Saturday, with Storm Eowyn moving in. Now, this system at the start of today isn't Storm Eowyn, but it is good to bring a spell of heavy rain across the country for a few hours, along with some very gusty winds, 50, 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts for southern and western England, as well as Wales. But it does move through. Brighter skies follow for Northern Ireland, Wales and the south by the end of the day, whilst the wet weather remains across Scotland and eastern England. Eventually, though, that tends to push northeastwards with clearing skies across the southern half of the UK. We're going to see temperatures fall away, lighter winds as well. So a fine end to Thursday, but quite a number of showers into North Wales, Northern England and Northern Ireland. And the most unsettled weather is expected at 6 p.m. across Scotland, with showers falling as sleet and snow over the hills. It's going to be blustery as well as the day comes to a close across Scotland. But overnight, those winds tend to ease, and with clear spells, temperatures fall away. A touch of frost likely for eastern and northeastern parts of the country, but that's only ahead of a very fierce low that's moving in overnight. This is Storm Eowyn, likely to bring widespread disruption by the start of Friday. Heavy rain, especially in the southwest, a spell of hail snow for northern England and Scotland. But the biggest cause for concern are the winds widely across the UK, away from the southeast, 60 or even 70 mile-per-hour wind gusts. But for Irish Sea coast, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, through northern England and North Wales, the risk during the first half of Friday of 80 or 90 mile-per-hour wind gusts. That could cause serious disruption and damage in places.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the A720 Edinburgh City bypass, there are long westbound delays after an accident earlier between the Sheriff Hall roundabout and Dreghorn Junction. In West Yorkshire, the A63 remains closed along Selby Road in Micklefield after an accident yesterday. In Nottinghamshire, the A60 is closed each way off the A52 at Ruddington after an accident. In Northamptonshire, the A14 is blocked eastbound at Junction 11 at Findon, causing queues, and the outside lanes closed westbound after an accident between Junction 1 at Welford and the M1-M6 Catthorpe interchange, causing delays. The M25 from Berkshire into Buckinghamshire closed clockwise from Junction 15 for the M4 to 16 for the M40 after an accident, with queues from Junction 13 at Staines. On the M4 in Berkshire, 2 out of 5 lanes are closed eastbound after an accident between Junctions 5 and 4B towards the M25, with queues from Junction 6 at Slough, and train services are suspended between Purley and both Caterham and Tattenham Corner because of an incident.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
So is there a cabinet split? Well, there's not many things, but Chancellor Rachel Reeves says that economic growth is more important to the UK than net zero, as she's putting it, making it clear, she backs a third runway at Heathrow Airport.
Well, that's despite concerns from the Secretary of State for Energy and Net Zero, Ed Miliband, and the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan.
Let's talk to Paul McGuinness, who's chairman of the No Third Runway Coalition, and the travel editor of the Daily Mail, Mark Palmer. Why are you against it?
Well, there are a multiplicity of reasons, actually, why we're against it. But I think we're actually discussing something of a red herring here. The point is, Gatwick was going to get the go-ahead, as was Luton. There'd be something of an elephant in the room if the government found itself announcing those two but saying nothing about Heathrow. It's a red herring because it's up to Heathrow to submit an application. And as yet, they haven't submitted an application.
Well, they're fed up because they've had so many, they've got nowhere.
They are, but there's not a lot the government can do about that. And I think even though Heathrow said, look, we want a clear steer from the government, we want the government to say that it's receptive, I think that what's about to be delivered is the opposite of that.
But why are you against it? It's overcrowded, the planes are circling round and round and round, either because they need another runway.
Well, I don't know.
Strangling economic growth.
There was a wonderful debate just before Christmas, not unfortunately on your programme, Andrew, about healthcare in Britain. And someone said, why is it that whenever we talk about health, we end up talking about the NHS? And I would ask you, why is it that whenever we talk about aviation and aviation capacity, do we have to talk about Heathrow? Look at it this way. We're about to have Gatwick and we're about to have Luton given the go-ahead for expansion. We've already had Stansted and we've already had London City. Between them, those 4 expansions will lead to 60 million more passengers. That is more than Heathrow expansion was going to deliver. And the great difference, of course, is that each of those expansions is effectively oven-ready. By the time 2 of those are up and running, Heathrow will not even have put its application in. What the government is announcing now is actually going to undermine the prospects. It's going to render Heathrow expansion uninvestable.
What Paul hasn't said is he lives in the flight path, of course, and he doesn't want any more planes going over his house because it will disturb his sleep. And
I'm one of the 2 million in that position,
right.
yes.
Mark Palmer, Heathrow Airport is an enormously important airport.
Well, it is, and I think, first of all, I think it's good that finally, perhaps, some decision is going to be made on this. I think if you go back, I think it was Jeff Hoon, if you remember him, back in 2009 in Gordon Brown's government that first raised this. And here we are, and we haven't even got to sort of planning application yet. So we've got a long way to go, a lot of argument, a lot of time for Paul to get across his arguments. And the government's in a very, very tricky position. It says that growth is the absolute, that is the crown jewel of its policy. And at the same time, it's going to face whatever decision is made, it's going to be unpopular. My view is that we need to be at the hub. We need to be a hub. We need to be at the centre of Europe, if you like, in aviation terms. I think in the short term, it'll create something like 77,000 jobs,
which we need.
I think that by Heathrow, by having the 3rd runway at Heathrow, in addition to using the emergency runway at Gatwick and expanding Luton, that will encourage. And yesterday, EasyJet said that they would start to apply to be able to fly out of Heathrow. That competition would bring prices down, which would be good for all of us. And so I think that we've got to grasp the nettle now, and this is the time to do it.
There's another issue there, isn't there, which is that even if there was agreement that this was a good thing in principle, that all our airports should potentially be expanded to meet demand, we have a very poor record in this country on, delivering anything very quickly and getting through planning. Is this really just signalling to say, we believe in growth, we're not captured by the net zero brigade? Do you think there's any real prospect that this will?
Well, I think it depends whether the Prime Minister takes a real lead on this. Well, he of course opposed it last time round. He did. Rachel Reeves was in favour of it. We don't really know what the Prime Minister thinks about this, but it needs some sort of leadership, as you say, to bring this to fruition.
What about the economic arguments, Paul?
Well, the economic arguments are very interesting. I was fascinated, that Mark quoted that particular figure, which is a figure which Heathrow, of course, have been quoting. The quality of many of the jobs that are on offer in Heathrow's model actually are not really career-type jobs. They're quite lowly jobs. And I think
a lot of people need those lowly jobs who aren't qualified to do anything else.
That may well be the case, and those jobs will be provided at these other airports. Again, not everything has to be in the overheated Heathrow Airport. There are other.
It's overheated because there's not enough capacity. That's why it's overheated.
No, it's not. We're talking about a part of the world, a part of Britain, the southeast, which is overheated. One of the identifications in the ANPS was that if Heathrow...
What's the ANPS?
Beg your pardon. It's the airport's national policy statement, which was voted on in 2018, which effectively was the permission for Heathrow to apply to expand. One of the identifications in it was that if it were to expand, it would necessarily put in flights, international direct flights, from the regions. The desperate problem that we have here is growth around the country. Every government has been seeking to achieve that. And all the evidence is that if indeed you pull everything back down into the southeast, into Heathrow, you're going to take away regional opportunities, not just for the airports, but for their parts of the economy.
Sorry, I'll come to you in just a sec, Mark, but we're just hearing that Sadiq Khan has been doubling down on his position. He's just said this to the London Assembly. What Londoners know and the government knows is that the aviation sector is important for growth, jobs and prosperity, but we face a climate crisis and a climate emergency.
What is the flipping Mayor of London thinking? Isn't his job about creating wealth for this economy? There he is banging on about climate change again.
I completely agree, and I just wanted to take up Paul's point that there's no particular reason why going ahead with Heathrow should impinge on regional airports expanding. Southend Airport, for example, is vastly underused. I mean, they could be flying 5 million people a year. They're now under new ownership. Bristol, Manchester, all these airports, there's room for great expansion. But one other point I just want to make, that this week, the current Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander, announced that establishing this thing called the Visitor Economy Advisory Council, which had its first meeting this week. And the whole idea behind that was to increase the number of people coming to this country, increasing it from, I think, 38 million currently to 50 million. Well, how are you going to do that unless you actually expand our airports?
Yeah, and it would be quite nice to go to an airport and a plane actually to take off on time, Mark. And, of course, if Heathrow's expanded, perhaps they might even take off within an hour of when they're supposed to.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. But I don't think that, as you say, that we're not great when it comes to actually implementing these things. But
I come back here because you made a very good point about our inability, apparently, to build things.
No, we can't.
Well, yes, and sometimes some things are virtually unbuildable. And please let's understand what this proposal for Heathrow is all about. They talk about a third runway as if it's just an addendum strip. The plan actually envisages increasing the size of Heathrow's state by an area which is larger than Birmingham International Airport in order to fly as many planes as Gatwick currently does. It equates to a proposal to build Britain's second largest airport next to Heathrow, the first largest airport, which is already statistically the most disruptive in the world by dint of its geographical location. Yep. Bang slap in the middle of the most densely packed residential region in our country. And that is why this has been so difficult to build.
Right.
Very
Gentlemen,
interesting.
we've got to move on. Very good to have you in the studio. How many planes do you fly over your house, by the way, Paul?
A fair number.
I think you probably know more specifically than that, don't you?
Yes, about 127 on about
127. There we are.
Including 11 at night under the quota.
I thought you know exactly the specific number. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Well, up next, find out why some people are embarrassed of chimney sweeps in Brighton. But first, if you're in search of some winter sun in this very cold winter, here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're tempted to leave the stormy weather in the UK behind and search for some winter sun, actually, there will be some across the Mediterranean, certainly some sunny spells for the Canaries, just 1 or 2 showers around. Windier for Portugal, that's all connected to Friday's storm in the UK, a few showers for Spain, but a lot of fine weather across Italy and Greece aside from the odd shower. Then it does turn much more unsettled across Spain, Portugal and into parts of France during the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
First, mate, we had lockdowns. Then we had soaring energy costs. Then we had a hike in national insurance for employers. Then we had soaring wage costs. And now the government expects people like you to monitor what people say in boozers. And if you don't, you might get sued. I bet you feel like saying cheers to them, don't you?
Look, it just looks like another war on pubs. You know, remember they tried to stop smoking outside as well. Luckily, they rethought that. But look, we've got everything stacked against us, Martin. And the last thing I need to do is go and get in people's conversations. At the end of the day, a pub is like an extension to your home. You know, it's a public house. Friends go to speak. Friends go to meet, unwind after work. It's none of my business what you're talking about. Any good publican, and myself included, anyone that was rude to anyone or on purpose, they want to offend people or they want to dig people out, antagonise them, of course I'm going to step in and say, behave yourself or you go. But look, how can I be on social media talking about everything, transgender, immigration, and people not be allowed to do that at the bar or do that at the table of a pub? It's ridiculous. And these ministers really do need to sort of look at this legislation and see where it could lead, because I'm not going to stop anyone speaking in my pub. Again, if they're trying to antagonise people or they're rude or trying to start trouble, they get thrown out the front door, and any publican worth their salt is going to do that as well. But we're not there to police people's conversations.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, chimney sweeps in Brighton are being asked to park away from homes due to stove stigma.
Yes, the council's clean air campaigns have led to embarrassment from homeowners who don't want chimney sweeps parking near their houses for fear of alerting their neighbours to their wood-burning stoves. Well, here's one reason why we shouldn't be embarrassed of our chimney sweeps.
Over the rooftop!
Of course, the fabulous Dick Van Dyke in Mary Poppins in A Step in Time. Now, we're joined by the chimney sweeper, Nikki Harvey. Nikki, what a load of rubbish this is in Brighton. What do they think of? This is this wretched council, which used to be run by the Greens, of course. So they're so embarrassed, you've got to be parked around the corner.
This is a colleague who was asked to park around the corner by one of the clients. The whole principle of actually wanting cleaner air is very sound, because, as many of the campaign groups say, that wood burning in cities does contribute to poorer air quality. But what we are looking at the moment is that overall emissions are the lowest they've ever been since they started recording them in the early 70s. Now, domestic wood burning has dropped slower than other things like cars or factories, etc. And therefore, it is so the percentage is slightly higher. So when we're looking at campaigning against wood burners, they're using that percentage rather than the actual amount of emissions, which is the lowest it has ever been. And the industry is bringing in lots of new technologies, better burning stoves, the ban on using damper wood. So all those are very, very good things. But you shouldn't be stigmatizing people for actually having wood burners, because they are. If you use a modern stove, you service it well, you use the right fuel, you use it responsibly, are good sources of heat that are very sustainable. So stigmatizing somebody fixing it is a bad thing. That's like stigmatizing taking your car to the mechanic.
Quite.
Absolutely. There was quite an increase in people having wood burners fitted, wasn't there, when the gas prices really spiked 2 winters ago. And so you can completely understand why people might want to use a cheaper and more predictable source of fuel, wood.
Yeah, it's it also gives you energy security. So if there's overload on the grid, you have another source of heat. There's a recent report out about actually the mental health well-being benefits of a stove, and people tend to sit around, you look at your stove rather than your phone, things like that. So there are very many benefits of having a wood-burning stove. Now, the issues that are getting kind of mixed up in some councils are it's not wood, it's wood burning, as in the burning of all wood on things like open fires is bad, because that does create the fine particle pollution that causes lung problems, and we do want to reduce that.
Nikki, I'm so sorry, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for coming on.
I love talking to
story.
chimney
We're
sweeps.
going to have to very quickly read this statement from Brighton
Council. This campaign is designed to highlight the dangers of using wood burners and open fires. I strongly believe most people who burn at home simply aren't aware of the harm they're doing. It's important we make sure our residents are aware of the health risks and impacts. Miserable.
And also, how can you hide you've got a wood-burning stove? Because they have a flue and an amazing smell.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure you can hide it.
Chimney sweeps are doing a great job. We love them.
Indeed.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A big change in the weather on the way. A spell of wind and rain today. That clears later. Then some even wetter and windier weather expected throughout Friday and Saturday, with Storm Eowyn moving in. Now, this system at the start of today isn't Storm Eowyn, but it is going to bring a spell of heavy rain across the country for a few hours, along with some very gusty winds, 50, 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts for southern and western England, as well as Wales. But it does move through. Brighter skies follow for Northern Ireland, Wales and the south by the end of the day, whilst the wet weather remains across Scotland and eastern England. Eventually, though, that tends to push northeastwards with clearing skies across the southern half of the UK. We're going to see temperatures fall away, lighter winds as well. So a fine end to Thursday, but quite a number of showers into North Wales, Northern England and Northern Ireland. And the most unsettled weather is expected at 6 p.m. across Scotland, with showers falling as sleet and snow over the hills. It's going to be blustery as well as the day comes to a close across Scotland. But overnight, those winds tend to ease, and with clear spells, temperatures fall away. A touch of frost likely for eastern and northeastern parts of the country, but that's only ahead of a very fierce low that's moving in overnight. This is Storm Eowyn, likely to bring widespread disruption by the start of Friday. Heavy rain, especially in the southwest, a spell of hill snow for northern England and Scotland. But the biggest cause for concern are the winds widely across the UK, away from the southeast, 60 or even 70 mile-per-hour wind gusts. But for Irish Sea coast, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, through northern England and North Wales, the risk during the first half of Friday of 80 or 90 mile-per-hour wind gusts. That could cause serious disruption and damage in places.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Amazing. Just the best feeling ever.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11 a.m. on Thursday, the 23rd of January, live across the UK, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, the Southport killer Axel Rudikabana has arrived at Liverpool Crown Court, where he'll be sentenced for the murder of the 3 little girls, BB King, Elsie Stancombe and Alicia de Silva Aguirre.
Well, the arrival came under very tight security with a police helicopter overhead as Axel Rudikabana arrived at Liverpool Crown Court for a few hours of a sentencing hearing that is likely to result in a very long sentence, but not a whole life tariff.
The number of people crossing the channel now is shocking. It's record numbers, as you rightly say. And this was Rishi Sunak's pledge to the country 18 months ago that he'd stop the boats, and the numbers have gone up.
So that was Sir Keir Starmer back in July, slamming the Conservative government on illegal migration numbers. But now a new record is set under his government as more than 1,000 illegal migrants have crossed the English Channel in small boats so far this year alone.
Well, this comes on the same day that it's revealed 1 in 12 people living in London is an illegal migrant, with estimates that there are around 1 million illegal migrants overall living in the UK.
And a rare red weather warning is issued for Northern Ireland and Scotland, and the Met Office is warning people to stay at home.
The quiet before the storm Arwen is due to make land in Northern Ireland at about 3 o'clock in the morning tomorrow morning. The worst of it will be at 6 o'clock. Those winds are meant to be very, very severe indeed, causing damage to property and transportation.
And a Russian spy ship has been warded off British waters by a Royal Navy submarine as Defence Secretary John Healey issues this warning to Vladimir Putin.
We see you, we know what you're doing, and we will not shy away from robust action to protect this country.
And some parents are fibbing the school system, as a new poll shows 1 in 4 admits of lying to get their children into their preferred school. This has been exacerbated, of course, by the government shoving 20% VAT on private school fees.
It's all me pals! Stepping time! Stepping time!
Do we need to save our chimney sweeps? They're having a tough time in Brighton as they're being asked to park away from clients' homes due to stove stigma.
Unbelievable. I know parents who fibbed about their schools, about where they live, about their faith, and they've even gone to church for months and months and months to get their child into the faith school they want. And this is going to be accelerated by the private school fees.
As a parent, you absolutely are driven to do the best thing
Of course you are.
for your child. I'm not at all saying that it's fine to lie, but you can totally understand why people do that. And the problem we've got with this league table system is that, you know, if you're wealthy enough to live somewhere with a nice school, you can afford the high house prices, your kids get into a good school. If not, you don't.
Exactly.
It's not a good system at all.
And we're going to get the Southport killing sentence later, and there will be a big row because he cannot be given a whole life sentence because he was 10 days away from his 18th birthday when he murdered those little girls.
Well, we'd love to hear what you think, so please do send your views, post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. But first, the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Miriam, thank you. The top stories. Child killer Axel Rudikabana will be sentenced later today after pleading guilty to 3 counts of murder. Alice De Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stankham were murdered in that vicious knife attack at a Taylor Swift dance-themed class last July. On Monday, the 18-year-old pleaded guilty to their murders as well as to producing a biological toxin and being in possession of a PDF named the Al-Qaeda Training Manual. He arrived to Liverpool Crown Court a short while ago. It's expected he'll get a hefty sentence, but not a whole life tariff. It's emerged that Rudikabana was known to authorities, but they all failed to intervene. Downing Street indicated nothing is off the table to protect children when asked what actions would be taken to enforce the Keir Starmer's promise of tougher rules on online knife sales. Sir Keir Starmer's vowing to take on the NIMBYs by reducing legal challenges to infrastructure building with a new approach, stopping, quote, newts and bats from blocking construction. Attempts to complete projects such as to build roads and power plants have ended up in recent years being marred by legal challenges which the Labour government is seeking to address. NIMBYs, which stands for Not in My Backyard, refers to people who oppose building in their area. The Prime Minister says for too long, blockers have had the upper hand in legal challenges, using our court processes to frustrate growth. As part of the government's plans, so-called unarguable cases will only be able to be brought back to the courts once rather than the current 3. Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook told GB News today's action will help to bring down energy bills.
Will still have a right to object to planning applications. They'll right to have a say to challenge the lawfulness of government decisions. What we're saying today is that as part of our plan for change, we've got to kickstart economic growth. We've got to streamline the delivery of critical national infrastructure that our country needs, whether that's energy, transport or aviation projects, and particularly in terms of the energy infrastructure that needs to come forward under our plan for change to get to clean power by 2030, that we get more timely decisions on these projects. That is the only way we're going to wean ourselves off a dependence on foreign energy sources and our exposure to volatile energy price spikes.
In other news, The Telegraph has revealed London is home to an estimated 585,000 illegal migrants, making up 1 in 12 of the city's population. Concerns over border control failures and pressure on public services are growing, but official figures from the Home Office are not available. The study, commissioned by Thames Water, suggests there are over 1 million illegal migrants in the UK, with 60% of those in the capital. The report suggests most illegal migrants arrived in the UK on work, study or visitor visas and then overstayed. The Metropolitan Police has been removed from special measures after more than 2 years as good progress has been made, according to the watchdog. The force had been put into special measures following extensive criticism it faced after the death of Sarah Everard, who was abducted and murdered by serving Met Police officer Wayne Couzens. After being under enhanced monitoring for more than 2.5 years, the force has now been removed to routine monitoring by the watchdog. Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley said the whole force has worked to fix its broken foundations and make sure officers are set up to deliver for London. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services said the Met has made a number of improvements, including in how quickly calls are answered, in professional standards and in investigating missing children. Elsewhere, the fires in California have flared up again, with more than 30,000 people told to evacuate north of LA. The latest blaze, dubbed the Hughes Fire, started late yesterday morning, around 40 miles from the Eaton and Palisades wildfires that devastated parts of LA earlier this month. Within hours, the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection said the blaze had burned across more than 9,000 acres. They added the fire was at 0% containment. Since that first outbreak at the start of January, 27 people have died. Dozens are still missing. A manhunt is underway in Plymouth for a male murder suspect after a woman in her 40s died, having been found seriously injured yesterday evening. Devon and Cornwall police said officers were called to the West Hoe area of the city around 9 p.m. yesterday after that victim was found seriously injured in the street. The person was treated at the scene by paramedics and taken to hospital. Detectives said the two people were believed to be known to each other. Dangerous conditions are expected, with the top-level red warning for wind issued for Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland across tomorrow morning. It's set to hit the country with gusts of up to 100 miles per hour. There are even warnings of possible tornadoes in the south of England today. Forecasters predict the worst of the wind will happen tomorrow when that storm arrives. The Met Office has advised people to secure loose items outside homes, as there could be a danger to life caused by flying debris. And in sport, Real Madrid have become the first football club to generate more than €1 billion. That's £845 million in revenue in a single year. Winning both La Liga and the Champions League last season, Deloitte said the Spanish club had overtaken Manchester City to reclaim that top spot in its Football Money League. Real Madrid also saw matchday revenues increase in 2023 and last year, after the renovations to the Bernabeu Stadium doubling to £209 million. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. It's 11:10 and we're live across the United Kingdom. I'm Miriam Cates and this is Andrew Pearce.
Lots of you been getting in touch, and a lot of you are pretty cross about the immigration figures and the farmers. Christina says this is because Tesco have now joined Little Morrison's. Was there one other? In condemning the government's inheritance tax hike on farms. Christina says farmers should be treated as a business. You wouldn't expect Tesco to sell off a percentage of their business to you. And Carol says farmers don't sell when they die. They hand on to the next generation who keep farming. No profit is made from the inheritance. That's right.
Exactly. And some of them, their actual income per year is well below average income.
Really
How are they supposed to pay the tax bill? It's astonishing.
These blooming Labour politicians who want to do this, they should run a farm for a month and see how they like it.
And I'm sure it's true that some people... Yeah, absolutely, 365 days a year. But I'm sure it's true that some people are buying land to avoid inheritance tax. But if that land is farmed and food is produced for the country, what's the problem? That's still a working farm.
I know. Exactly.
Anyway, also lots on Heathrow.
Yeah.
Richard says building a new airport is a better idea, so a new one. And Mark says if we need more flights in, Heathrow is not the place to use. It's too crowded around the outskirts. Without any building, redirect some flights to other airports. That's a bit like what Paul was saying, that actually it's not just a new runway. You're talking about an enormous piece of land. And think about all the land that you're going to have to compulsory purchase, houses. It's very difficult and expensive. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it's perhaps not the easiest place to increase capacity.
And David says have an international airport at Manston. Kent wouldn't be then clogging up the M25 because they could use it. And Christina says Cardiff Wales Airport could be used for international flights. It can take jumbos already. It even took Concorde.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we've got lots of these little airports all around. We were talking about Southend earlier. Sheffield used to have an airport quite near the city centre.
Yeah.
No longer.
This is a very nice message from Patricia. We like nice messages, Patricia. It says, we've enjoyed the morning programmes this week with calm and thoughtful discussions by Andrew and Miriam.
Oh,
how nice is that?
Thank you very much.
I've enjoyed it too, working with Miriam. It's been lovely.
No, it has. We're back together on Monday, aren't we? But I think I'm with Ben tomorrow.
Right.
Well, moving on, the child killer Axel Rudikabana has arrived at Liverpool Crown Court ahead of his sentencing later today.
Alice De Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stancombe were murdered in that knife attack at the Taylor Swift-themed class last July in Southwark. We'll talk now to our GB News Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, as I was thinking about him arriving, is he going to be allowed to pull any stunt? Because he's been virtually mute, I think, in court. He's not spoken at all. And we know some killers, when it's come to their sentencing, they refuse to leave the cell beneath the court, so they're not in court when the sentence is read out, or if there are witness statements. And I don't know if there's going to be statements from the girls' families. Is there any possibility that this creature could do that?
Well, the hope has to be that he will behave himself, that he will, first of all, attend the court, go into the dock. He has been brought up, of course, from prison for this sentencing. But you're right, we've had multiple occasions in the past where different offenders, either at sentencing or during the trial itself, have acted up, have refused to attend the court, attend the dock, have made noises or been quite abusive in the dock itself. He has had absolute and utter contempt for the legal process right from the get-go. He has never engaged with the police investigators about his potential motives. In any interviews, he refused to speak. And of course, with regard to the court appearances, we know that, because I sat through them, when he appeared either in person or via video link from prison, he didn't speak at all, even just to confirm rudimentary facts, his name, address, date of birth, and the like, just wouldn't speak. And he sat there either in the dock or on the end of a video link with usually his jumper pulled up, obscuring his face. And that's why it was such a surprise on Monday when finally we did hear some words, albeit muttered under his breath, pleading guilty to the 16 counts that he faces. So we await to see just what his demeanour and behaviour will be in court. But of course, we just hope that this man who has committed the most horrific of crimes will finally perhaps face up to that, behave himself in the dock, because you have the families of these 3 young girls who he murdered, the families of many of the victims who were badly injured by this offending as well in court. So for their sake, we hope it goes off without incident.
Thanks, Mark White. I really hope that they just drag him up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, actually, I would change the law. Actually, I would change the law to compel them to be in the dock when sentencing is done, and when if families do read out an impact statement, they should be forced to face it.
Because he's going to get the custodial term, absolutely, but that is part of confronting the consequences of your crimes, isn't it? Absolutely. We'll, of course, be bringing you all the latest on that on GB News as they're developed. Anyway, the Met Office has issued a rare red weather warning for Northern Ireland.
Urging people to stay indoors ahead of Storm Eon, if I pronounced that correctly, as 100 miles an hour winds and flying debris could cause danger. Join us now from Comber is GB News Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie. Doogie, have I got these pronunciations all horribly wrong? Forgive me if I have.
Well, I'm standing in Comber, or Comer as it's known. It's Gaelic for meeting of the rivers. But this is the quiet before the storm here. You can see behind me Strangford Lough, beautiful Strangford Lough, and you can see just the coastline down in there. That most of that seaweed and stuff will probably breach this wall and come over the top tomorrow, because Met Éireann is telling us that this storm will take out over 300,000 homes with power. It is due to hit land in Tipperary, Cork, Killarney, right down the very southern tip of Ireland at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And then, as these storms do, they move in a swirl. Seems every weekend I'm on, there's a storm, and I've got quite used to tracking these maps now of where they're going. And as it moves its way up the Irish Channel, it's not really being said, but I would look at it and think that Bristol may be in for a bit of a time here as it moves up. And it moves into Northern Ireland probably at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, on the way down here, I have noticed that the power companies, etc., are topping trees that are close to power lines. They are very, very good at this, I must say, the Northern Ireland and Scottish electricity services. They're well used to this. I mean, it was this week last year that I was in Portrush reporting on a similar storm that took down the dark hedges that appear in the Game of Thrones. It was very severe in other parts. A couple of people were killed in that when trees fell on them. But the usual warnings are going out. If you don't have to go out, don't do it. And it's the heavy rain that will come first, driven by the wind. On high areas there will be snow. It will cause traffic disruption and travel disruption. But more importantly, it's the property damage that it will cause. I mean, after the last storm, I was on top of my mother's roof putting ridge tiles back on. So we've been well told, and in the past I have looked at these and they have been amber warnings and so forth and haven't come to much. This one definitely seems to be travelling in the right direction.
All right, that's Doogie Beattie in Northern Ireland. Now, up next, is it finally time to reunite the right? The former Tory Home Secretary, Sir Oliver Braverman, certainly thinks so. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's the body image thing that concerns me. It's young girls watching Love Island and really skinny girls and young boys
hit the gym but after this. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, they're seeing perfect bodies on the screen.
You don't need to go in the gym, Maymoon. You look gorgeous as you are, love.
I know. You see, the reason I don't enter anything like that, Kerry, is you know
you're going to win.
Exactly. And it's not fair. It's not fair, I think, on everybody else being there.
It's not fair.
No.
But, Kerry, what do you think about the body image thing? You know, when you talk about your daughter, is that something that you'd worry about, her comparing herself to the likes of what she sees on the screen?
Now, this is where there's a conflict of interest for me, because I've been brought up in this industry since I was 17, so it's massively affected me. I mean, when you're put on the front cover of magazines after having a baby with a stretch mark in the circle of shame, you know, it does do a psychological effect on you. I think a lot of celebrities who have been around for so many years, as I have been affected by that. But everyone has to bear in mind, I've had my children. I'm in my 40s. I feel I'm entitled to have my tweaks and try and improve on what I think are going down south, and health and safety, tripping over any things that I don't want to be tripping over anymore. But I definitely do believe, I mean, majority of the young girls that go on Love Island, they all have the same big lips, the same big eyelashes, all the butt implants, and they're barely in their 20s. You know, it's if you go to the airport now, I remember going to the airport and I looked around and all the girls looked exactly the same.
GB News, the People's Channel.
From the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 22 minutes past 11 and this is Britain's Newsroom with Miriam Cates and Andrew Pearce.
The noise in the corner is Karen Malone. It's always a noise in the corner.
We're gossiping, we're catching up.
And the former Labour government...
Sitting silently in the corner at the moment.
Former Minister, Bill Rammer. We should call you a former minister.
I know,
you were a minister.
You've upgraded me since the last section.
Well, you were a minister. You were a Minister of State. You were.
Were you Armed Forces, was it?
Armed Forces, Higher Education and Foreign Office.
Too. And then you went to run a university.
Yeah.
Good.
And at least he
ran
wears
a university in Iraqi Kurdistan.
You did?
Yeah.
You did?
Really?
Yeah. Which must have been really interesting.
Yeah.
That's not obviously the word you're going to use to describe your time in...
It was an experience that I'm absolutely glad that I had.
But glad it's over?
But they operate by different rules. And I was brought in to reform, and actually they didn't want reform.
Interesting. Cultural differences.
Yeah, very difficult.
And we don't have to make Bill stand up and show us that he's wearing ridiculous clothes, as we did with Jonathan.
No. Well, I'm not sure about that tie and stripy shirt to go
no, he's looking good, I think.
My wife authorised this.
OK.
We better move on to the actual news.
Yes.
I'm sure we can make
Rachel Reeves. Rachel Reeves.
OK, so finally, this is the first thing she's ever said that I agree with. And what she says is that growth has to trump net zero. Hurrah! Maybe she's only saying it because she's in Davos and she's trying to glad hand all the world business leaders and she knows that's what they want to hear. But maybe Trump's inauguration speech the other day is having a massive effect already on the world. But of course, with her saying that now, she's got to put up a wall with her cabinet, especially with the zealot Ed Miliband, who Bill and I have just been talking about outside. And you know, he's going to go mad over this. He's going to bang his head and spit nails today. And he's going to hate it. But it's true, you know, the planet for now has to wait. If the economy is in the toilet, we have to do something about it. And she seems to be, she's talking about going ahead. Well, she's not talking about it. The rumours are she won't make a comment about it, but the rumours are that she's going to give this third runway to Heathrow the go-ahead. Now, we've been talking about this third runway for 80 years now. That was when it was first mooted. It's been passed by so many governments. Yeah. Starmer voted against it last time round, and this time round he's saying yes. But it just shows you, doesn't it? They have all these net zero targets and the world is the most important thing. But actually, the most important thing for the people living now in this country is the economy, and we've got to deal with it.
And Bill, there is an issue about confidence in the economy. It's draining away. There's another survey today from the Retail Federation saying that consumer confidence is growing, and I would blame the Chancellor for a lot of that because of the negative talk when they got into power. None of the optimism we've thought, well, you might not agree with what Trump said, but it was upbeat, it was optimistic. None of that from gloom, doom, gloom, Rachel Reeves and the Prime Minister. So perhaps backing a runway at Heathrow, which could create 80,000 jobs, is the right way forward.
I will acknowledge the rhetoric immediately after the general election was too depressing. Having said that, you know, the indicators on the economy are up and down. Just the back end of last week, the FTSE 100 went through the roof. The IMF upgraded our growth forecast to the highest in Europe. But we need growth above anything else. And the announcements today on the planning reforms, so stopping the NIMBYs being able to block major infrastructure projects. And if you bear in mind, 58% of major infrastructure project planning applications end up in the High Courts, and we get delays for years and years.
It's called local democracy, Bill. It's called local democracy.
Or vexatious judicial review.
So you don't want local democracy?
I tell you what, when I was the MP for Harlow, we had a big debate about a housing development north of Harlow that I led a cross-party coalition in favour of. And there was noisy opposition to it. We then did a poll through the council and 64% of people backed the development. The opponents are really, really noisy, but there's that quiet majority who need this stuff to go through.
This is not the most important thing.
Similarly, Heathrow, I agree with you.
Yeah.
You know, successive governments have gone backwards
You can't be talking about
forwards.
growth forecasts and saying it's all looking good and everything. Because the bottom line is, last month, the borrowing was stood at nearly 18 billion quid. The interest payments payment on that was nearly 9 billion quid. So there's no money to build anything because it's all been spent on the interest payment. So we can't ignore those kind of figures. And, you know, I mean, just talking about the net zero project, did you say there was a little survey this week that said in an 18-hour period in this country...
I did.
Did you say it? It said that the wind farms, or windmills, as Mr Trump calls them, produced 0.1% of our electricity in this country. So we've got to scrap all that, and we've got to think about growth. And a strip of tarmac on the runway at Heathrow is not going to change everything. It really isn't. However, the projected the projections for the business opportunities for the economy are 61 billion quid.
Yes,
so she needs a win, Rachel, and maybe this is her win.
Absolutely. And look, you made the point, Carol. 1946, we've been debating Heathrow since then.
That's ridiculous.
And, you know, successive governments have opposed it in opposition, supported it when they were in government. We need to finally get to grips with this, but we need more. I mean, I'm really heartened by the fact that Rachel Reeves called the regulators in for a rollicking, and she said what you're proposing in terms of deregulation to kickstart the economy is not good enough. An indication of that is she sacked the chair of the Competition and Markets Authority, and I think we need more of that.
But much easier would it not be if she just reversed her NI rises and let businesses have a chance to work and flourish?
Carol, people voted for many things at the general election. They voted for massive investment in public services, and you know we've seen the start of that. That money needs to come from somewhere, and the problem
they promised us no tax rises.
No, hold on. The problem we have politically is we debate on shows like this, and everybody's in favour of the investment. Nobody's prepared to say or countenance where the money's going to come from.
But this was a government that said they were going to raise it elsewhere. They didn't have to raise taxes, and they've done exactly that. Covered business and growth.
We said employees, national insurance, income tax and VAT we wouldn't increase. The party was consistently pushed during the general election campaign, rule out employee and national insurance increases, and they refused to do so.
We want to move on. I want to talk about, because we talked about Trump and his upbeat optimism. I think it's extraordinary, with executive orders, what a president can do, and I wish we had a bit of that here.
Oh, my God.
And the extraordinary step about the diversity staff. Diversity, what is it? Diversity... DEI.
Diversity, equity and inclusion.
And so they're all being put on leave before they're being fired. Hurrah, Bill. Hurrah.
I disagree.
Of course you do.
You know, diversity and inclusion, and there's research evidence, is good for businesses. It helps productivity.
No, it isn't.
It helps...
Hang on, let me make his point.
There's a substantial body of research evidence that backs that up. There's some organisations in this country that need more research, diversity and inclusion. Metropolitan Police, for an example...
Can we just separate diversity and inclusion? Of course inclusion is a good thing. Of course every employee in a workplace, every child in a school should be included. But diversity is something totally different, and it encourages people to celebrate their differences rather than to be united around a common cause, a common organisation. I don't think there's any evidence that emphasising diversity helps any cause.
I think you need to celebrate what unites us, but you need to recognise that there are different people, different traditions, and
That's
you need...
just called being human,
and you need
recognising
to bring them
it's
together.
become a gravy train.
40-odd million a year spent on diversity in the NHS. Is it not the most diverse employer in Europe?
And do you know, the bottom line is, whatever happened to the situation where you get a job on merit, the colour of your skin shouldn't matter, where you grew up shouldn't matter, your education shouldn't matter, you should be the best person for the job. And that's gone now because people have to fulfil stupid diversity targets.
I think
so they don't take on the best person for the job.
It's illegal to discriminate, Carol.
Oh,
you know that.
I think...
And it can't and doesn't happen.
I have to tell you, Bill, I cheered when I heard the President of the United States say that. I thought, go on, let's have a bit of that here.
But hold on, let me make this point as well. Any diversity and inclusion programme needs to be reasonable and proportionate.
Right.
And I'm not sure they always are.
No.
But also, there's polling evidence from the organisation More in Common, and it shows that once diversity and inclusion programmes are contextualised, you know, what it's for, what it's there to do. Something like 7 in 10 of the population back it. But I think what's really lacking is persuasive explanation of why these things can help.
You say there's evidence to say that, you know, these things work. There's also evidence to say, and I haven't got the report to hand, but there was evidence recently to say that it does the opposite, that it creates division. And that can't be, because, of course, people from one group are going to get cross if they see people from another group getting the job because of the colour of their skin, because of where they've come from. You know, we're getting kids excluded from universities now, smart kids, because they don't fit fit this little diversity profile. It's not right. The best person should get the seat at university or the best job.
Carol, I was a former university vice-chancellor, and what you're talking about is contextualised applications. And if you are...
No one knows what that means.
Well, let me explain. If you're a working-class kid in a rundown school and you get 3 Bs, you have arguably got as much potential as someone who went to a very good school and got 3 As. That's all it's about. It's taking account of your potential and your ability to succeed. And I think that's a good thing.
But those are exactly the kind of people, poor working class, especially boys, who are being discriminated against because of DEI training.
Exactly.
Well,
so it's had the opposite
There's
effect.
a measure of agreement here. For a long time, as both a political operator and as an educationalist, I believe the biggest marginalised group in society are white boys, class
They
boys,
are.
and that needs to change.
And you know, when I was a kid, I remember back in the day when working class kids got places in university and got financed by the state. That stopped happening 20 years later. So and when they were getting places, that was nothing to do with diversity. That was to do with the fact that they did well, no matter what school they came.
Grammar schools.
Yeah.
We've run out of time. We didn't get around to the fact that dogs are having a depressing time in January, apparently.
Yeah.
So just be nice to Murphy when you get home.
I get my little baby.
Bill, come and see us again. Carol, come and see us again. We're going to go to the headlines now with Tatiana Sanchez.
Andrew, thank you very much and good morning. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. Child killer Axel Rudakabana will be sentenced later today after pleading guilty to 3 counts of murder. Alice De Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stancombe were all murdered in that vicious knife attack in a dance class last July. On Monday, the 18-year-old pleaded guilty to their murders as well as to producing a biological toxin and being in possession of a PDF named the Al-Qaeda Training Manual. He's now arrived to Liverpool Crown Court. It's expected he'll get a hefty sentence, but not a whole life tariff. It's emerged that Rudakabana was known to authorities, but they all failed to intervene. Downing Street indicated nothing is off the table to protect children when asked what actions would be taken to enforce the Keir Starmer's promise of tougher rules on online knife sales. In other news, the Metropolitan Police has been removed from special measures after more than 2 years, as good progress has been made, according to the watchdog. The force had been put into special measures following extensive criticism it faced after the death of Sarah Everard, who was abducted and murdered by serving Met Police officer Wayne Cousins. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services said the Met has made a number of improvements, including in how quickly calls are answered, in professional standards and in investigating missing children. Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley said the whole force has worked to fix its broken foundations.
Sadly, the Met's foundations were badly damaged. There were lots of the underpinnings of the Met that needed repair work, and they've all pulled together to do that. And we've made improvements across call handling. We're in our call handling centre here, where we're dealing with over 4.5 million contacts from the public a year. We've made improvements in how we identify child exploitation, made improvements in solving rape and serious sexual offences. We've put many more officers in that area. We've strengthened our commitment to neighbourhood policing. We've got 500 more officers there. So across the Met, we've been stacking up our attention to the detail.
Sir Keir Starmer is vowing to take on the NIMBYs by reducing legal challenges to infrastructure building with a new approach, stopping, quote, newts and bats from blocking construction. Attempts to complete projects, such as to build roads and power plants, have ended up in recent years being marred by legal challenges, which the Labour government is seeking to address. NIMBYs, which stands for Not in My Backyard, refers to people who oppose building in their areas. The Prime Minister says for too long, blockers have had the upper hand in legal challenges, using our court processes to frustrate growth. As part of the government's plan, so-called unarguable cases will only be able to be brought back to courts once, rather than the current 3. And finally, some breaking news this hour that Sainsbury's will cut more than 3,000 jobs and also plans to close its remaining in-store cafes as part of a major restructure the supermarket chain has just announced. More on this breaking story as we get it. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, breaking news, extraordinary. We just talked to Mark White about this. GB News understands that the Southport killer, Axel Rudigbana, is refusing to go into court for his sentencing. We'll have more on that as we get it, and that is why, apparently, the hearing is being delayed. Shocking.
Yeah, what exactly?
They should drag him up.
Might happen.
They should drag him up and make him.
Well, up at noon, we've got Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily, and they're here in the studio now. Will you be covering the...
Absolutely. Of course, we know that Mark White is up there outside the court. Sophie Rupert is up there inside the court. We're getting more information all the time. But, yeah, this extraordinary...
outrageous.
...sort of refusal of Axel Rudigbana to come into the court, to hear his crimes, to hear the evidence, to be there. And it's so important that he is physically there for closure for families, for justice to take place.
Why has he got any rights at all?
It's not legally mandatory, though, is it?
No,
because
it should be.
They wanted to change the law.
They talked,
this happens too often.
This happened last year. There was a big case, and the government said they changed the law. These things aren't difficult to change if you've got all cross-party consent. They could do it in an hour.
And there would be.
There would be.
Absolutely. And the amount of victims and families that
outrage. Imagine
would
for the
appreciate
families.
that. I mean, hopefully he will go up. Hopefully he will go up. But that's very interesting to know.
They should drag him up.
So far.
Drag him up, and then his lawyer can sue the state.
I mean, we have straight jackets for a reason.
That's right.
If he's kicking and screaming, sedate him for a little bit, drag him up, give him a kick.
Sorry, he's got no rights at all.
I mean, he's
pleaded guilty to 3 shocking murders and stabbing 10 or 11 other people.
Yeah, so we're obviously going to be following the sentencing, see what the judge...
We're going to go back to the court now because Mark White is there with us. Mark White, can you update us, Mark?
Yeah, well, we're just hearing from our colleague Sophie Rupert, who's inside the court, listening to some of the discussions that have been going on between some of the legal counsel there. And it does seem that Axel Rudigbana, for whatever reason, has been refusing to come up to the dock, which would explain the delay. This should have been underway at 11 o'clock this morning. You've got everyone in court, including, of course, members of the families of those young girls who were murdered by this young man, and also other victims who were stabbed by Axel Rudigbana as well. Now, you were talking about him being dragged up to the dock. That's not going to happen because it would just be too unseemly and distressing, I think, for the families of the bereaved to see this man, if there was, some very significant disturbance within the court itself. I was at the trial of Lee Rigby's killers, Michael Adebowale and Michael Adebolajo, when they were sentenced, and it got very, very nasty indeed in the dock as they shouted out constantly at the judge. They were eventually dragged down from the dock, down to the prison cells below, fighting as they went. This went on for about 10 or 15 minutes, and it was horrific for people, family members of Lee Rigby who were in court and had to watch this. I don't think any judge would want to put the families who've been put through so much already through the ordeal of having to watch that as well. So it's likely that the sentencing, if he still refuses to come up, would go ahead regardless.
All right, Mark White, thank you for that. Well, that was exactly what I feared was going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Such a shame. It's a shame because he should be sitting in there.
He should.
Yeah. He should.
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I would gag him.
But
and then he would be in court.
I do understand his point that it would take away from the victims almost, wouldn't it, if he acted up?
Kicking and screaming,
They could put him in there while the family... Well, they could empty the court, put him in there, gag him, and then get the court case
it would be more satisfying to see him writhing there in the...
Yeah.
Well, more from Tom and Emily at 12. Well, up next, Thames Water have finally done something useful. Find out what in just a few moments. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Storm Eowyn will arrive tonight, bringing damaging gusts of wind during tomorrow. A Met Office red warning across Northern Ireland has been issued. The storm itself is developing out in the Atlantic at the moment, really intensifying. Before it arrives today, a spell of wet and windy weather for all of us from this weather front. There's a Met Office yellow warning in place for the gust of wind around the west coast of Wales and across southern England. Spell of wet weather sweeping through, blustery conditions conditions, but cheering up a little this afternoon for much of Wales, southern England, seeing some sunny spells, staying fairly soggy over northern England and Scotland, with more snow to come over the tops of the hills, but mostly it is just rain. Brighter skies means it is turning slightly milder across the southwest, but still fairly gusty and blustery. Still some more wet weather to come in across Scotland well into this evening. As I said, a little bit of snow over the tops of the hills, but nothing too much to concern us with that. But it'll tend to clear away as we go through the night. Some drier and clearer conditions for a time across Northern Ireland, but very different ends to today compared to how tomorrow will start, because Storm Éowyn is, even by this evening, getting into parts of southern Ireland. Damaging gusts of wind swinging in here through the course of the night. Spell of heavy rain as well, with some hill snow mixed in, but it really is the winds we're most concerned about, picking up right across these western areas, and then another intense zone of strong winds coming in across the west of Ireland through the really first part of Friday morning. That is likely to swing across Northern Ireland during tomorrow morning's rush hour. The storm system, you can see it there, then heads its way up across western Scotland with damaging gust of wind, then likely across parts of southwest and central Scotland. But a very gusty, blustery Friday morning everywhere. Across much of England and Wales, it actually turns a bit brighter. There are a number of Met Office warnings in place, including that red warning. Please do check the Met Office website for full details.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 11:43. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Just before we talk about the next item, it's quite significant. The mother of the murdered 9-year-old, if you remember, Olivia Pratt-Corbell, she was shot in Liverpool as Mum opened the door.
Yeah.
And the killer, Thomas Cashman, he was chasing a fellow drug dealer into her home. He refused to attend court, same way this ghastly Southport killer has done. So the mother met the Prime Minister 2 days ago to campaign for the law to change so that these appalling killers can't hide, cower in a cell underneath the court. It's appalling. And I'm sorry, they should drag this monster into court in Liverpool.
Of course he's
and
going
they can face the music.
Yeah, and he's going to get a lot of years in prison, but part of facing up to the consequences of your crime is to...
If they worry he's going to be shouting and hollering, gag him.
Well, we'll see if there will be potentially a law change after this. It's possible. Well, Thames Water have revealed that there are over 1 million illegal migrants in the UK and that in London, 1 in 12 people are illegal migrants.
Well, let's talk to now the Stephen Wolfe, who is the Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Stephen, morning to you. Long time no speak.
It is, and good morning to you both.
Well, we were just making the point, this is the first time either of us have found anything positive to say about Thames Water, because this is a survey they commissioned, which shows 1 in 12, almost 600,000, potentially there's 1 million illegal migrants in this country. This is a massive, abject failure, isn't it, of successive governments, Stephen, to get to grips with our borders?
Absolutely, it's appalling. I mean, we are drowning in data from Thames Water, one might say, finally, because this is exactly the sort of information that I sought through freedom of information requests from the Home Office. I know that Migration Watch, another think tank, has made similar requests over the past 10 years. And the government has consistently hidden any data by refusing to respond to it. There have been some attempts previously at saying that this number of 1 million is just basically what we expect to have in this country from research in Parliament itself. But the totality of it, now coming clear from an organisation like Thames Water, says to us that we should be deeply, deeply concerned, not only about the impact it's having on jobs, but the other aspect about it, which is not yet to be covered but should be, is about the black economy, the people smuggling gangs who are sneaking people in and receiving income from that black economy, and the way that gangs are interrelating with one another to ensure that they're receiving more money than the taxman.
Yeah, and of course the security aspect as well, which is the unknown numbers of crimes being committed by people who then can't be traced. Of course, the question will be, what do we do about it? We've had a big report out this week from Policy Exchange looking at how difficult it is to deport anybody, even if they are discovered as being here illegally. And, of course, there will be calls from those on the left to introduce ID cards and other forms of identification to try and solve this problem. What is the answer? Obviously, it's awful that we're in this situation, but how do we get out of it?
Well, we've advocated a threefold attack on dealing with illegal migration and illegal asylum. First of all, is at an international level, we have to remove ourselves from the UNHCR's protocols, or at the very least, seek a new protocol which redefines what an illegal migrant is, which is one for economic reasons, not those that we currently see where you're allowed to expand asylum. The second is that we work with a very clear principle for those coming into this country, is that they're not housed in hotels or good accommodation. We should be building camps for them whilst they are assessed. This is, after all, what the UN's own refugee committee does in different parts of the world. And thirdly, and more importantly, we now should be adopting a very clear policy of detain and deport. And if those countries that the people that we find are illegal here are in countries such as Iran or Iraq who refuse to accept it, then we have to deal with using our aid budget or other soft powers to ensure that they don't get that money until they do.
Do you got any confidence any of this is going to happen, Stephen?
Well, we are with the Labour government, and the interesting thing about the Labour government, what I've noticed, is that they are trying to change the rules, or they wish to change the rules on our driving licences, which is, as your question is, it's a backdoor way of making sure that we have an identity card. They see the solution of tracking individuals in this country rather than dealing with those who are coming from abroad.
Stephen, I'm really sorry. We are going to have to leave it there, but hopefully you'll come on again, because I'm sure this is a topic that we're going to be covering in great detail. First of all, if you're in search of some winter sun, here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're tempted to leave the stormy weather in the UK behind and search for some winter sun, actually, there will be some across the Mediterranean, certainly some sunny spells for the Canaries, just one or two showers around. Windier for Portugal, that's all connected to Friday's storm in the UK, a few showers for Spain, but a lot of fine weather across Italy and Greece aside from the odd shower. Then it does turn much more unsettled across Spain, Portugal and into parts of France during the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And fashionistas are keen to see which new trends are set to hit the catwalk.
Well, our next guest is very well placed to share her predictions with us after being a contestant on hit ITV series Dress the Nation, as well as being an upcycling and sewing consultant.
Wow. Joining us now is Tendai Murewe. I want to go back to you appearing on the ITV Dress the Nation.
Right.
Tell us about that experience. What was that like?
Oh, that was one of my highlights as a upcycling consultant. I learned to sew in my kitchen 5 years ago. And then, you know, during COVID, just making masks. Then the next thing I was on a Dress the Nation, making dresses in front of TV. Yeah, it was just incredible. I think we all had all these clothes that we have, but we don't know what to do with them. So mainly I started with men's jackets, taking off the sleeves and putting it like a print on.
I've tried this. I've tried taking off my sleeves before. I now have about 3 jackets with no sleeves. I never managed to put them back on.
You need to come to a workshop. You need to come to a workshop.
I need an upcycling consultant. 2025, what can we expect fashion-wise?
I think bold prints are back. People are loving. I think you walk on the streets in frollals and oversized men's jackets.
So the exact opposite. We have drastically underperformed this morning. You're just saying not like us.
We just woke up this morning and thought it's winter, it's cold, it's grey.
Grey, miserable.
Is that not the way to go?
No, it is. It's still, I think because fashion is expressive. It's whatever you want to express yourself. You know?
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's 11:53 and some breaking news. Southport killer Axel Rudikabana was taken to hospital in the early hours of this morning for medical attention, but is now due to attend court to be sentenced, sources say. And we're joined by GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. Mark, a surprising revelation. Do we know any more about this hospital visit?
We don't, but some further breaking news. We can now confirm that Axel Rudikabana is in the court here at Liverpool Crown Court in the dock, and this sentencing hearing is now getting underway. He had been, we understand, refusing to come up to the dock for a while. That resulted in about a half hour almost of delays to the proceedings here. And yes, you're right, we can also confirm that he was taken to hospital from a prison, a local prison, where he's been housed in recent days for what they were expecting, of course, to be a criminal trial lasting 8 weeks or so. Previous to that, he had been at prison down in London, but had been at a local prison. He was taken in the early hours of this morning to that prison for unspecified reasons, but we were told for treatment. But clearly, whatever the issue was in the early hours of this morning, it was felt that he could be released from hospital and he could attend court. Whether that's related in any way, shape or form to his decision not to attend a court, initially we don't know, but he has now, it seems, agreed to go up to the dock. We're told from our colleague Sophie Reaper, who is inside the courtroom itself, that he's sitting in the dock, he has his head down, and he is refusing to speak and engage with the judge. But whether he speaks or not, the case against him will continue, and for the moment at least, he is in the dock.
Well, thank heavens for that, Mark. We don't know, of course, we won't know how he was persuaded or whether he was forcibly dragged up to court. Presumably he was persuaded.
Persuaded, I think, definitely. I just don't think, as I said before, Andrew, that they would go into the process of physically dragging him up to court. It would be too disruptive, too traumatic for the families who have been through more than enough, having seen what this man has done to these little girls, to have to endure the spectacle of some kind of serious disorder within the courtroom itself. So somehow he's been persuaded to get up to the dock.
Well, that's a relief. Thanks for that. That's Mark White at the court. And, of course, we will be with GB News will be there all day today when we get that verdict, when he gets his sentence. That's it from Britain's Newsroom with me and... No, you're back on Monday.
I am with you, yes, and I'm back tomorrow with Ben.
You are. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily. See you later.
That's right, and we're sticking with Southport with that news that Axel Rudiker, after refusing for almost an hour to head to that dock, is now there. We'll be with Mark White and more.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt a lot lighter. I would say if you're thinking about entering, just enter.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I'm really pleased to see this story. It's the news that bowel cancer screening, the age for that is going to be dropped from 60 to 50. And this is really, really important because bowel cancer is one of the biggest killers and more people appear to be